Hello and welcome to the National Center on Forensics community-focused webinar series. Today we will hear from Julie Bolser, Executive Director of Public Affairs and Senior Advisor at the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, and Siobhan Hudson, Executive Director of Forensic Investigations at the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, on expert forensic communication, best practices, and common pitfalls. Without further delay, I will turn things over to our presenters.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Natalie. My colleague Siobhan and I are pleased to be joining all of you today. We are, in the course of this webinar, going to be talking about best practices and common challenges in communications for forensic science organizations. We look forward to telling you throughout the course of the presentation about our respective roles leading communications for key audiences at the intersection of public health and safety at the largest medical examiner's office in the country. Our outline of today is that we'll first provide some background and some context for our organization and for our work. We plan to share some examples of recent work that we've done, and then we'll finish with some tips and some recommendations before we get into our question and answer session. We also know from our hosts that we have an accomplished group of guests gathered with us today, researchers and practitioners, teachers and students from the forensic science world and related fields. And we really look forward to your questions so that we can have a productive exchange with you. Good communications, we know, involves not just output, but also professional feedback. So we look forward to talking after the presentation. So getting started for our presentation today, we wanted to first provide you with some context for this discussion. It's a very timely and relevant discussion that we're having about best practices in forensic communications. Certainly, with an audience such as yourselves, we don't need to repeat that all forensic science organizations are increasingly front and center in global developments, whether that's the pandemic that we have recently experienced, the epidemic of fentanyl overdoses that many of our organizations are currently grappling with, gun violence, natural disasters, or the climate crisis. Time and again, we hear that forensic science is in the thick of things. What we know from surveys from the pandemic is that government organizations, particularly those in public health and related areas, need public trust to perform to maximum effect. And that kind of public trust we know is increased when audiences feel that our organizations are providing information that's clear, consistent, impartial, and ultimately very helpful for our audience on a day-to-day basis to protect themselves and their loved ones. Strategic communications, which is our subject for today, plays a key role in building and maintaining that trust. Just for your information, this photo is from the OCME response to the pandemic, where in conjunction with our partners, National Guard among them, we led the largest mass fatality operation in New York City history. That was an incredible recent challenge for our agency, but we emerged stronger and better for it. As I hope that you all can say the same for your organizations. Okay, so just before we move on, I wanted to also say a little bit about OCME. OCME is the largest medical examiner's office in the country. We're more than 100 years old, founded in the year 1918. What sets us apart is the fact that here in New York City at the medical examiner's office, you can find a comprehensive set of resources under one roof. We have our forensic pathology operation with approximately 30 medical examiners and dedicated support staff. That includes an esteemed training program for the next generation of forensic pathologists, 24/7 investigations unit, which my colleague Siobhan will be telling you more about in a little bit, and the mortuary. A largest public crime DNA lab in North America is located here. In also the oldest forensic toxicology laboratory, the only in-house molecular genetics laboratory, and also a forensic anthropology lab. We also have a mass fatality management team that's experienced with disasters ranging from the World Trade Center and 9/11 all the way through the pandemic and beyond. On that note, this photo that you see is from our Special Operations Center. That's in many ways like the nerve center of our agency here in Manhattan. This is where all the calls from across the 5 boroughs come in, where cases are assessed if we need to be involved as an agency, and where investigators 24/7, 365 days a year are dispatched to scenes throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City. The photo is taken from what I can refer you to for further reading. It's a great story that features our chief medical examiner, Dr. Jason Graham, and our first deputy, Dr. Michelle Sloan, in Emory Magazine. They are both alumni of schools in the Emory University world. And as we'll have a few links throughout this presentation, I would just encourage you, to feel free to refer to those samples of work to, further support what Siobhan and I will be sharing with you. We talk about communication, and I think it's important to set up, why it is that we communicate. Now, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, the ability of government organizations to carry out their public health and safety function depends on public trust. And that's increasingly more urgent and relevant following the experience of the pandemic and all the associated social changes that have come with that. That means that our work as forensic science communication leaders requires public understanding of and engagement in what we do. And this is really where communications matters the most. We communicate, we'll see throughout this presentation, to instill confidence in our impartial expertise as scientists and as doctors. We communicate to show the compassion and the dedication our people bring to their roles. And we communicate to explain our practices to audiences. Many of these audiences, as Siobhan will tell you about, are going to be learning about some very difficult and complex information at the most emotionally challenging time of their lives. And that is where communication really is essential to helping us perform our mission in service of the public. In terms of our audiences and who we're communicating with, Siobhan and I will be talking to you about 2 of those audiences. The audience that she'll address in just a moment is that of families. By far, here at the medical examiner's office, I think staff will overwhelmingly tell you that families are our most important audience. This is why our dedicated professionals, day in and day out, do the work that they do. It's to help people at the worst time of their lives when they learn about a sudden and traumatic loss of their loved one. Another audience that is very important to us that I'll be talking about, to the extent that it helps us serve the public and supports that mission, is the media. When it comes to media, we want to have prompt, clear, and impartial sharing of information. As an example of how we work with the media, you can see here in the photo, this is an announcement that we had in June 22, where Mayor Eric Adams and our chief, Dr. Jason Graham, were at our DNA laboratory in Manhattan announcing the nation's first ever dedicated DNA gun crimes unit. This unit has been put into service with new staff, and it is expediting the turnaround times that it takes to test evidence from DNA gun crimes. We're very happy to report that in the year since the media coverage of that announcement, we actually did a follow-up announcement just a few months ago in June 23, saying that this unit has been able to successfully reduce the turnaround time to 30 days or less, and it's contributing to what is the overall effort to make sure that crime in our city is decreasing, and particularly violent crime. So we are happy through our work for the criminal justice system that both exonerates the innocent and helps to convict the guilty, to be playing our role in that process. And certainly the media have helped get word out, and they very much helped recruit new members of this unit when we were able to do media work around that. Before we get into our family audience communications with Siobhan, I just want to say that we have additional audiences, of course. I'm sure your agencies also work with partner agencies. There are elected officials, community groups, hospitals, vendors, all manner, but we want to focus today on families and on media. So without further ado, I want to turn it over for a little bit to Siobhan, who will talk to you about family communications. Siobhan, over to you.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome everyone. As Julie mentioned, we working with the family is really probably the most important audience for us, right, as medical legal professionals in conducting death investigations. And so we want to make sure that our communication is effective. So I'm going to start at the bottom of this slide, which is anticipate. And I always place it last, but really should be the first thing. And one of the things that we drove here with our staff is to anticipate the family's needs. We are the experts. We do this day in, day out. We are meeting people on what is most likely the worst day of their lives. And so we want to make sure that we are prepared to provide them all of the information that they're going to need in as little communications and interactions as possible. People don't want to be dealing with the medical examiner's office day in and day out, right? So just to start with our death investigators, whether you're arriving on scene or you're on the phone, you want to introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you doing in this person's house, right? Many times when we're talking about a residential death, you're arriving to someone's home. So introduce who you are and your role in the agency. What is the reason for our involvement? Why was OCME notified? So for us, OCME, but why was your agency, the medical examiner's office in particular, contacted? It's not something that is, as many shows as there are out there about death investigation, this is still pretty unfamiliar to people. And so it helps to explain why we're there. If you're speaking with family members over the phone, we want to be cognizant of your greeting. And this is something that's very difficult, right? As humans, we are so used to good morning. Well, it's not a good morning for someone who's just lost their loved one, right? So we always want to be mindful of that. When I answer my phone, I just say New York City Medical Examiner's Office and my name. If I'm calling a family member, explaining the purpose for my call. Why am I reaching out to them today? And also making sure that I'm in an environment that is appropriate for having that communication, right? I don't want it to sound like I'm outside in public or, there's a lot going on in my background or laughter. So that's really important. Whether you're on scene or on the phone, as soon as you get through your introduction and explaining the purpose of your call, you want to walk through what are the next steps? Like, what are we going to talk about on this phone call, but also what's going to happen with your loved one here in our facility? One of the things that we do every morning, just in talking about anticipation, whenever our cases, and we have a decedent that comes in that is under our care, even if we've spoken with the family at the scene the prior day, once we have the examination set the next morning and the medical examiner is signed, our identification unit will proactively call families. We call them right away to tell them, this is what's happening today. This is the medical examiner who's assigned to your case. We go through the identification requirements. Why do we do that? Because we know that the family members, they have a lot of questions. They're going to want to know this information. And so why wait for them to call up? They're going to call all day trying to reach someone to find this out. So it's always good to proactively reach out and answer these questions. So exchange, also very important, exchanging pertinent information, providing them with case numbers, points of contact numbers, but then also collecting the information that is needed in order to accurately certify cause and manner of death. Discuss next steps. So when we are seen, we have a team of investigators that respond here at OCME, but then we also have a separate transportation team. We want to explain to families who's all arriving from our agency. Again, we're at someone's home, right, many times, and we don't want people just showing up unexpectedly. We want to tell the families, I'm here, I'm Siobhan Hudson, I'm going to conduct an investigation, right, here at the scene. My colleagues, the next step is going to be that when I leave here, my colleagues who are going to handle transportation to bring your loved one to one of our medical examiner facilities. So we just want to go through that, explaining all of that to families. Some additional considerations for communication, right? Recognizing and being observant of cultural and religious customs. You want to be aware of your own body language, so making direct eye contact with family. If you're in person with family, whether you're both sitting or you're both standing, you don't want to appear as though you're speaking down to family or towering over them. So it's always good to ask, like, if they would mind, if there's a place that they would like for us both to sit down. Or even if there's just one chair, that's fine. But whenever possible, trying to be on their level. Being mindful of our facial expressions. Again, it's very common that You may see even in the media sometimes, you'll see, unfortunately, the picture that they always catch. If there's someone outside, whether it's law enforcement, medical examiner agency, we're doing this every day and we're not realizing people are watching, and maybe we're talking with a colleague about something that has nothing to do with the case, and we smile. We're talking about sports, something that happened, and that's the image that gets caught, right? So you want to always be mindful of everything, or everything around you, your body language, your facial expressions. Um, Identifying the decedent by name, right? It's something very simple but very meaningful. And also avoiding cliche statements and euphemisms. This is another thing that's really hard for people in our outside of our professional lives, especially with family members. I hear it all the time myself when family calls me, my own family, they talk about people passed away, they didn't make it. We want to make sure that when we're delivering a message, especially when we're making death notifications, which we do here at the OCME, we want to use language that is very clear. We want the person the first time to understand that very critical message that we are delivering. We cannot make assumptions that people understand what expired, what didn't make it, what passed away means. We're also in New York City, right? So this is a huge hub, a global hub for everyone. And some of this language doesn't transfer over to other cultures and other locations. So we want to be very clear about the language and using universal language to explain that someone has died. And staying away from making commentary, they're at peace now. I know how you feel, because we don't know how they feel, or that this was God's plan. These are some of the things that, again, outside of our professional lives and just as humans, that we tend to want to, we want to really console, but we have to be mindful about how we do that, because in the end, we have a professional stance and we have a job that we have to do. And the one thing to always remember is that families, they are always going to remember how they were treated during this time and during their interaction with their office. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Julie.
All right. Thank you very much, Siobhan. Looking forward to questions that our colleagues who are joining us today would have for you when we finish. I'm going to now jump back in and talk about the second audience that we work with primarily in my role here, leading public affairs for OCME, and that's the audience of media, or the area of practice that we call media relations. We here in New York City are in a very large, diverse, and quite active media market. And we do want to leverage those relationships in service of our overall mission, which again is to build and to foster and grow public trust so that we can do the work that we need to do for people at the most difficult times that they're experiencing in their lives. We're going to leverage those relationships with media to communicate our expertise, to show the compassion and the dedication of those who work for our agency each and every day. People like Siobhan and her team and the hundreds of others here, and also to make sure that our audiences and the general public understand our practices so that if the worst should happen and they need to interact with our office, perhaps we can create a foundation and they understand why it is that we're calling. I want to walk through a few examples now of some of our recent media relations with the hope that they may be able to be instructive for some of you on the line. Again, feel free to check these out in greater detail at the links there where you can go to the clips. So the first example that I wanted to share is from our Missing Persons Day event. This is an annual event that we at OCME started to host in 2015. We've had multiple installments, save for some time when we had to pause it during the pandemic since that time. It's very much something that the staff here look forward to, and media, our partners in media, also look forward to it. The idea with Missing Persons Day is, as I'm sure many of you who are joining us are aware, the epidemic of unidentified remains that are in medical examiners' offices across the country, and the need to identify and return them to their loved ones using the latest technologies that we have available. So our team here does that every day, but also makes a special point of it on Missing Persons Day, where we invite families to come forward and to avail themselves of any of the resources that we have here in our office. If a family wishes, in a confidential way, they can share a DNA sample if they're a blood relative. They can share stories with our interviewers. They can share personal items, and all of the teams that I described in our DNA lab, our forensic anthropologists, make themselves available on that day to talk with families who are trying to locate a missing loved one. We're happy to say that working with media to get the word out about Missing Persons Day, since we've started this event, we've been able to make dozens of identifications that we can directly attribute to the attention around this event, where people attended because they heard about it in the media, and we were able to make a match and recover a loved one. In a few cases, we've even worked with partners in law enforcement, and were able to determine that the missing loved one was fortunately still living, and we're able to provide a family a lead in that way. So, when we make an ID, we also go back to the outlets that we work with, and we make sure that those media outlets know that they were a part of that success. And most are always very happy to be able to report that and to follow up and close that loop. So here is an example of a piece that we did for local station WPIX Channel 11 in advance to help promote Missing Persons Day, to show our DNA scientist aspect of it, and to give prospective attendees an opportunity to see what they would be experiencing, and to help demystify Missing Persons Day, and to drive attendance. And this has been a very effective way to raise awareness of the missing persons problem, of long-term missing, and to drive attendance on that event day, and then again to amplify the message in the days after when we do have successful matches. Second area that I would talk with is media relations as it relates to showing the compassion of the people who work at our agency. Our Missing Persons Day event very often is grounded in showing the expertise that we bring to a problem. This present example, as it relates to the fentanyl epidemic, is part of our strategy to show through the media to help the general public understand the compassion and dedication that our staff bring to the effort. As I'm sure so many of you are aware and dealing with every day, the fentanyl crisis is ravaging communities across the country. It has certainly created a substantial increase in caseloads for us here in New York City, which we have very publicly discussed and wanted everyone to know about the impact on our office. And we also want to make sure that everybody knows it's in our interest that we find ways to fight and ultimately stop this epidemic. One of the innovative things that we have done here at OCME through the leadership of our chief, Dr. Jason Graham, is the creation of our team of social workers who interact with every family that loses someone to an overdose. This is data-driven work where, through careful study of data over the years, our team of epidemiologists and social workers has learned that there are definite unique needs that arise in the population of people who have lost someone to an overdose. It could be that they're struggling themselves with a drug use issue. They may have, as a result of losing their loved one, then lost housing and food and other supportive resources, or they may simply, need someone to talk to and some help with grief counseling. So through our team of social workers, we reach out to the families who've lost a loved one to drug overdose, and we check in. And if they're interested in engaging with us, we offer, connections to services. So the segment that I'm showing here as an example was part of a two-part piece that we recently did with local news station CBS Channel 2. This is the second of the two parts, and this is the one where anchor Christine Johnson is speaking with two members of our social work team who talk about the human element in all of this. The first piece talked about the general epidemic and also the involvement of our forensic toxicology lab. And this series about the impact of the fentanyl national crisis on the medical examiner's office was sparked by the interest of a producer who contacted our public affairs office, and the individual had read a piece that we did earlier this year with the New York Times detailing the extent of the crisis and how it affects us. And my point being that this is simply a producer working for TV who really wanted to help get the word out and to do what they can about the crisis. So that's, I think an important point to know that media are just as impacted by these issues as families we serve. Very often, they may know, someone personally, and they want to be of help. So that's also an avenue to consider. The final example is the way that we use media relations to communicate our practices. If this looks familiar, that's once again Siobhan speaking to local news station ABC7 in the wake of what was the very tragic situation of the Bronx fire in January of 2022. This was a fire that claimed the lives of 17 people, many of them children, maybe, and many of them members of the immigrant community from West Africa. They died as a result of a fire that was sparked by a malfunctioning space heater here in the winter in New York. It was a mass fatality response for our agency, and it presented significant challenges with identification. We had to make sure not only that the people in the community we were serving understood the time-consuming nature of this work, but also that the public at large understood, and to manage those expectations. Where you have many victims who may have similar names, they may be similar sizes, similar ages. So it does, take some time to do that kind of identification work and make sure, above all else, that when you return someone to their family, that there, are no errors in that process. So as soon as reasonably appropriate, following that incident, we took an opportunity to work with local media to arrange a story to talk with a reporter about what goes on behind the scenes when you have this kind of mass fatality incident in a fire. And again, our speakers included Siobhan and other members of our identifications and investigations team in what I think was an excellent piece to help explain those practices and ultimately, contribute to our mission to serve people in the best way possible because they understand what is involved in this work. You can once again check out that link if you want to hear more of what Siobhan has to say. So before we head into the Q&A, I just wanted to offer some practical tips and takeaways for those of you in our audience. In terms of recommendations, particularly for communicating with media, but this would also involve family communications too, I'm going to wholeheartedly encourage everyone to make sure your communications in your organization is subject to an audit. This kind of communications audit that I would recommend every organization do can be a formal or an informal survey of where things stand. Think of this as both an evaluation exercise as well as a formative exercise. It's kind of a snapshot of what are your current capabilities, what are challenges, what are opportunities for communications, and where do you want to go. Broadly, when you're doing this kind of communications audit, and here perhaps is where we might even have a part 2 webinar to go into more detail, you're going to be looking at the pillars of strategy, of implementation, and follow through. So on the strategic sense of a communications audit that I would encourage you to undertake, one of your first questions or opportunities is going to be to make sure that your organization has a broader strategic plan, because any communications planning that you're going to be doing will need to align with that organizational broader strategic plan. It's going to be separate and distinct from that, but it'll certainly be underpinning what is the strategic plan of the organization. The goals that you have for your communications always, I would recommend that they be defined and that they be measurable. So So for instance, are you looking to recruit a position that is difficult to fill? Maybe a particular university in your community or a nearby region has a program that's dedicated to the study of that subject matter, and it's a logical pipeline to fill that kind of position. Well, as you saw earlier with the piece we did with Emory University, there's a lot of opportunity with alumni publications, for instance. So one way that you might want to approach that as a measurable goal to get people to apply for and to fill those positions would be to do some interviews with alumni publications or student publications at these target schools. Perhaps you have someone on staff who graduated from there or is relatable to those students. You can also try publications maybe that parents and grandparents are reading and put pressure on prospective job applicants in that way and turn them on to some careers that family members might wish to point them to. So really your communications, as always, again, should be serving a purpose and a strategy that you're going to be able to measure. And certainly an increase in applications at a high need position is a measurable thing. Target audiences. Who is it that you need to reach to do your work? I hope we've demonstrated, if nothing else, that in doing any communication, it needs to be targeted, it needs to be measurable, and it has to be done for a purpose. So purposeful communications would be asking, why is our forensic science organization talking to a particular group, and who are they? And one way that you can go about that would be to ask the people who work at different levels of the organization and in different departments, who are they interacting with day in and day out, and who is it that needs to hear from your forensic science organization to make sure this mission is able to work to maximum effectiveness. The messages that you develop always should be specific and clear, and they should reflect the values of your organization and speak to the values of your audience. Again, always look to the asset of your employees. When they're speaking with these different audiences, what do they learn about what matters to the people that they're talking to? What are your outreach teams and your investigators know that they can tell your communication staff about how a family should be spoken to when they're undergoing such a difficult time in their lives, as opposed to talking to another type of audience. The messengers you choose should be credible and should come, if at all possible, with some kind of connection with the communities that you're trying to reach. Establishing that kind of credibility and that accessibility really does go a long way. In choosing your communications outlets, you should think of where are the people that you're trying to reach to be found. For instance, certainly youth, are going to be on social media, but maybe some older members of the community that you're trying to reach are best reached through radio or through local TV news. So the outlet is really just about what is going to be helpful for helping you reach the people you need to reach. It's not an end in itself, but it's a tool for reaching that audience with the message that you want to get across to that audience. In terms of your implementation, be thoughtful about the types of tools that you'll need, whether that's brochures or pamphlets, but you don't need to go overboard. You simply need to think of what is it that you need, to effectively accomplish the communications purpose at hand. Train your messengers, give them the messaging points, and then monitor and evaluate. That means including feedback from members of the community. As we've mentioned throughout, communications truly is a two-way street. So if somebody, for example, makes a comment on your organization's Facebook page and says that the signage outside your facility is very difficult to read and makes your organization's headquarters hard to find, don't just ignore that comment on the Facebook page. Thank the commenter for it and look into it. If you just listen, there's a lot that you can hear going on in the communication coming at you, and that is equally important to the communication that your organization is putting out there. Maybe you'll even learn about a need in the community that could spark a whole new initiative, sort of the way that we did with Missing Persons Day. So it's about having eyes and ears open. And then finally, with the follow through of your communication, Of course, it's very important to have leadership participation. You do want to have buy-in. It will be immeasurably easier to not only get resources for your communications activities, but to just in general have the support of top leaders in the organization, understanding what it is that communications means for the organization and why it's valuable. Certainly, that can be a matter of talking up. So if you have a communications role, or if you're supporting someone in that communications role, definitely make sure that the head of your organization hears from you and understands why what it is that you're doing is important and why the organization should be investing in it, whether that's through resources or through time and attention. Earmark the resources that you need. You don't need a lot here at OCME. As with all government agencies, we do face constraints, but we're able to accomplish quite a great deal, as I hope we showed, with not having a tremendous amount of resources. We are able to involve all levels of our organization, which is one point I hope to conclude with and have you take away. That part of the reason that we are able to do a lot with a little is that all members of the agency are encouraged to be part of the communications function. So never forget that every member of your organization is an ambassador for your organization. And that's from the person who answers the main phone line to a lab manager who has interactions with vendors to an outreach worker who's talking with families. Everybody has a role to play in communicating the values of your organization and in building that trust. So never forget that it's not just about the public affairs or comms department, it's about all of your employees. And that saves a lot in the long run when everyone is contributing and chipping in as part of that mission. Two examples I'll leave you with before we get to Q&A that I think summarize these points about credible messengers, about targeted communications. Both of these are from a local news outlet, Brooklyn News 12. The first is our former Brooklyn medical examiner, Dr. Julian Samuel, who spoke with the local news channel for a piece for Black History Month earlier in the year. And this was a piece that the News 12 approached us about. It was an opportunity to make sure the local community, particularly the Caribbean community in Brooklyn, is aware that there is a trusted medical examiner from their community who understands their concerns and is working there in the Brooklyn office. And then below that, we have an example that was also from Brooklyn News 12, who wanted to work with us yet again on a piece for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And this is our photographer, Albert Chow. And there was a piece about Albert and the work that a forensic photographer, which he is, contributes to helping doctors photographing cases day in and day out, and then ultimately putting those pieces together in the file for the families to make sure that they can get the answers that they need, and if needed, even those photos are serving the criminal justice system. So just I think two helpful examples of how to use credible messengers and to work with the media to reach key audiences without whose trust it'll be more difficult to accomplish the mission of a public health and safety agency. So that's all that we have for our presentation portion, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you both for providing that informative presentation. My name is Danielle Jackson, and I am with American Society for Clinical Pathology. We will now begin our Q&A session. Our first question is from the audience, and it reads, are there ever times you have to address a death notification over the phone? Say family members of the deceased individual are out of state or far away. If so, how would you address this over the phone when things like body language do not play a factor? If not, do you wait for the family of the deceased individual to come to you before delivering the news?
I will take that one. Here at the OCME, absolutely, all of our death notifications are made over the phone. And one of the difficult things is that this is something that traditionally is handled by your law enforcement, local law enforcement agency, and they will go to the person's residence. But being such a large jurisdiction, and having the responsibility of making notifications once the decedent is in our care, we have to do that. We do have to take that on. And so we do reach out to family members on a daily basis over the phone. We will first verify if you know who we're speaking with, explain to them that we're calling from the city of New York's medical examiner's office. Are they in a place where they can speak? And you know, relate to them that we do have some important information to share with them regarding an individual who is in our care, who's unfortunately died, and may be associated with, or you know, if we say that it's potentially a loved one of yours, and then we give them the person's name. So yes, that is something that we do on a daily, very routine basis here in our office. But the messaging, again, it's very important to be very clear and effective, but also we want to make sure that people are in a place where they can take that phone call, that they're not driving. That's something that, you know, we try to just make sure that they're in a place that they are ready to receive this information.
We have two of the similar questions. Do members of the mass fatality response agency receive specialized training? If so, what does that training entail?
So we do routinely undergo some training here at the OCME. So we have our day-to-day response, and then we have our disaster response schedule as well. So many of the leads, including myself, serve a specific role when it comes to incident response. And some of the training that we do hazmat, hazWOPER training internally. We also participate in several tabletop exercises, sometimes just with OCME, sometimes with some of our local partners. Sometimes that's in the form of a no notice drill, which we just had two of them in the last couple of weeks, where you just get a phone call at 10 p.m. and says, you know, this is a drill, but here's the incident. A plane has crashed at JFK Airport, and you have to go through everything. And so we do continuously train on our response to mass fatality.
Another question that we have, you all presented a number of examples of positive media coverage, but can you tell us about a time when things did not go as planned with the media? For example, how did you handle that negative coverage?
Yeah. Hi. Yes, certainly. I think it's important to note that in this type of work, um, there are always going to be challenges because these are not easy subjects. We're talking about, you know, as Siobhan said, people and situations that really present some of the worst days of people's lives, worst, you know, time in the city and in our communities. So yeah, there are some difficult calls. I would say, without you know walking through a specific example, I like to think that you can practice preventive communications and be prepared for a crisis before it happens. So I would like to leave those in our audience with that point, and that would be the importance of having a team assembled who you know are the go-to team in the event, because it will happen that you inevitably get a phone call about something difficult that the agency is or has been involved with or is about to be involved with. This team should consist not only of someone who works in your communications function, but certainly senior administrative leaders, quite likely someone from your HR team, someone from your IT team, where increasingly, you know, with HR, you know, we have employee related matters that may come up. If there's a personnel issue in the media, we may have, you know, cyber issues too, that increasingly organizations such as ours that deal with sensitive information. I'm sure many who are joining us today, you know, you hear time and again, your IT officers are very concerned about hacks and other types of threats. So you want to have a go-to crisis team that from each of, you know, the key departments, you have someone who is part of that. So you're not scrambling when the time, you know, you learn of a negative news story that's being, you know, possibly considered about your agency, you want to have your go-to team already in place. You should be practicing, with them. Much as Siobhan said, practicing scenarios for mass fatality. Assemble your team, on a quarterly basis and walk through the worst case scenario of if the agency were involved in some very difficult press. How would you handle it? And more than anything, I think also filling the pipeline with positive news coverage is a good way to make sure, before the negative call inevitably comes, that there is a lot of good word that's out there about your agency. So you want to fill that vacuum with that understanding. You want to have relationships with reporters in place so that, should that reporter call and have a story that they've heard about that's not going to be so flattering, that relationship, though, is established and you're able to talk to them in a reasonable way. And they know you, as a direct and an honest a broker, as somebody that they can work with and trust that you're giving them, all the correct facts and your agency side of the story. So I think there's a lot that can be done to prepare. But yeah, I think you should also recognize that there will be some negative times, and to the extent that your employees also are trained in communication, I think that can help prevent a lot of that. We often have had, what we call one-day stories, which is something maybe that might burn in the local press for a day or so, and it's because of a service-related issue. A family may have misunderstood something or felt that something was not properly communicated, and as is their right, they go to the press to deal with the matter there. So I think a lot of those things, may be able to be preempted again if you have a staff across the board who are trained in the kind of communication that Siobhan was talking about. And I think we can forestall a lot of misunderstandings that way.
Thank you. Another question. When there is a mass fatality response, what is the biggest challenge in regards to working across agencies, emergency response teams, and notifying those families?
I think the biggest challenge, obviously, the type of incident, presents its own type of challenge. Where the incident occurred, how many victims, the condition. Are we talking about severe fragmentation? So that presents its own challenge. I think that when we're talking about the initial response, probably the biggest challenge is knowing that all of the information up front is going to be incorrect, right? A lot of the information as things are first being reported in is going to be inaccurate. There's a lot of, depending on the situation, there's going to be life saving efforts, right? That's going to come first, along with us being ready and knowing that, okay, there's this massive fire and it does not sound good and we need to deploy out. So people, depending on partner agencies, if, they're going to be focused on saving lives initially. So that's, I think, is usually the big challenge. But then also, again, it just really depends on the type of incident and the scale of the incident. Yeah.
Speaking of those challenges with the families who may be in difficult emotional spaces, how do you handle that?
That is always, I think that on day to day, anytime people ask me that question, a lot of people outside will ask, well, how do you deal with the, decomposition and odors? And like, that's not the most difficult part of this. The most difficult part is dealing with families who are grieving, dealing with a mother who's just lost their child, violently. And so, that's always something really difficult when you're having a conversation with family because you have to keep control of that conversation. You want to allow families to say what they need to say, but also recognize that this is coming with their grief and a lot is going to come out that has nothing to do with the investigation itself. And so always trying to find a respectful way to redirect the conversation or, saying that, it sounds like they have a lot that they're dealing with at the moment. And, I can certainly contact them again. And, I want them to give them some time to be able to follow back up. Is it okay if I check back in with you in a couple of days or, whatever it is tomorrow? But to recap, these are the things that we talked about. And these are the information that you're going to follow up on for me for our next conversation. Knowing when to cut that conversation off. It's always a fine line, right? You don't want to seem rude, but families will really, especially if families are coming in person. That's one of the things that we realize too is that when we were doing identifications, a lot of our decedent identifications on site, the identification part of it didn't take up most of the time. It's once the family has you, right? They have someone to talk to. They have someone to vent to. They have someone to let it all out. And so you're sitting there on something that would have taken 15 minutes. Now it's been 1 hour and you're still sitting with the loved one. So it's always a very, it's not easy by any means. But, the more you have these conversations, you become very comfortable and in tune with how to appropriately step in and just kind of redirect. We get involved in a lot of family disputes. That's something that's a thing here that we have a whole protocol written because there are family disputes, right? And so we want to give people time whenever we can. How about I give you some time and we can follow up with you? Does that sound like a good idea? Um, so yeah, some of the things that we do here to navigate those challenges.
Thank you. Another question I have from the chat is, this is a time when budgets across many organizations are strained. What kinds of resources and staff are needed to allocate those communication functions?
I'll take that one. So yes, you are correct. After the pandemic, certainly our city and I would imagine many of your jurisdictions, we find ourselves faced with some really stark choices. In terms of our formal public affairs operation here at the medical examiner's office, that consists of me. Um, so the way that I have approached that challenging terrain is to make sure that I'm enlisting as many allies across the organization as I possibly can. There's a remarkable number of our professionals here who are interested in supporting the communications work, serving as spokespeople, as our credible messengers, um, having, different heads of each department, say, designate someone who will be almost like the journaler and the reporter for that department who will be a liaison with me, because it's as one person it can be difficult to know everything that is going on in the organization at every time, but you want to make sure you're getting a very robust view of such a diverse organization and an equitable one, and that every piece of good work is having an opportunity to be elevated. So one way that we've been able to do that is encouraging departments to have somebody on their team who knows that they can reach out to public affairs and let me know, what is going on monthly in that department. What are the good works? What are the priorities? And then I think also, as I had said in the presentation, having the leadership, certainly having our chief know the value of public affairs and understand the function, has also been helpful because they will be in a position to let department heads know that public affairs is a unit that's crucial for the agency, and it's a function that will need to be integrated throughout the work of the agency. So I think it's, if you're lacking in extra hands and eyes, one thing you can do certainly is get creative and enlist partnerships throughout your organization is a way to do it. But I think we're also proof that it does not require a very enormous budget, and it just requires some dedication and some creativity, really.
I have one last question. What additional communication related training resources are available that you are aware of for forensic laboratory employees?
Hmm. Do you mean for communications of the sort that I was discussing, or for the kind that Siobhan was talking about? Because I think a lot of it would be best practices, throughout the communications world, generally speaking. I would like to say that, if I may just share my screen again, in terms of resources. I have two for you right here. It's Siobhan and myself are here to speak with you if you have any media relations related questions, or anything related to family communications. Don't hesitate to share an email. A lot of what I have drawn on in my work is quite commonly strategic communications stuff that I have, either reviewed in, with friends who work in the field. So I think drawing on a lot of general lessons, and as for specific to us, we talk a lot with our colleagues in criminal justice, or in other areas, and get some tips from them too. So, and public health. So yeah.
Siobhan, would you like to take a stab at that one?
Sure, I will say that nothing prepares you, nothing trains you better than having that conversation with a family member and having it go wrong once. And then you learn what to do and what not to do. When we talked about the euphemisms, one of my colleagues always says, like, he never forgets when he, was leaving a scene and told the family, I'm very sorry for your loss. And the parents, shouted back, we didn't lose him, he died. So and that from there, he's never said those words, I'm sorry for your loss, because, right, you didn't misplace, it's not like you misplaced your child. He actually died. So
Hmm.
sometimes it just really, I have to be honest, like no better training than being in this work and having that communication day to day, because that's really what builds your skill. Just knowing, okay, mental note, that's not something I'm going to say going forward, or knowing how to navigate this type of scenario. Because although you're going to have various different types of scenarios, they tend to repeat just with different people, right? So I think that's really the best training you can get is on the job
Hmm.
training.
Yeah. And I will add, if anyone is, wanting perspective on communications, you really can't go wrong also with talking with reporters in your community. If you do have, some local news outlets, whether that be a newspaper, hyperlocal news channel, never underestimate how interested people are in forensic science work. That's, I think, thanks to what we call, right, the CSI effect, where there's a broad range of public interest in what goes on in medical examiners' offices and DNA labs. Of course, some of it is not always accurately understood, but that's where we have a very important role to play in helping to dispel myths and helping people understand the work as it's really being done. So I think if you are interested in having some conversations, with people who cover, again, criminal justice, law enforcement, human interests, and social developments in your community. I think you'll find that they are quite eager, to have a meet and greet. You could try, having something, strict off the record. Invite them in, and give them an overview of the work, and ask them, what is it that would be helpful for you? What do you think your audience wants to know? And find out how can you work together to tell the story of your agency and to help the public in your community understand the work that's being done. Most members of the media, again, they're incredibly interested in this work, and they're very eager to speak with those of us who are doing it, and to get the story right, and to help people understand, because they know how important it is. So.
And I have one last question, if we can answer this in like 30 seconds. What are some of your self-care techniques that you provide to your team following these difficult responses?
Um,
Siobhan?
yes, with my teams, I always try to, whether it's myself or some of the managers, we are very mindful in watching the cases that our teams go out to and just checking in. Not necessarily approaching it and saying, "Oh, that was a really tough one," but just checking in with them. Tell us about the case. Just allowing them to be able to talk sometimes just allows that decompression naturally. But we do other things. We just engage. We talk about, TV shows. It's just a way to really take their mind off of the trauma that they just saw and responded to.
Well, thank you so much, Siobhan and Julia. We really appreciate the webinar for today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our presenters, and thank you all for attending and being here with us. Have a great
Okay.
day.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
As you depart, we kindly ask that you take a minute or two to complete our post-event questionnaire. The link will be pasted in the chat and also appear as you exit the Zoom room. Your feedback helps us improve our outreach efforts and continue to provide the best experience possible. Thank you again for attending, and we hope everyone has a great day.